What a dying light being revealed to me about Jesus' true message will shatter everything you think you know about spiritual awakening. Before this story ends, you'll understand why organized religion couldn't give you the connection you've been desperately seeking, and you'll discover that the answers were never in a building, they were always within you. If you're ready to hear a truth that has transformed my life from complete emptiness to profound peace, subscribe to Stories of Light and activate the bell. Because what happened to me, Claire Patterson, a 47-year-old hospice nurse in rural Oregon, will show you that awakening isn't about doctrine or rules. It's about remembering what Jesus actually taught, that love is the only truth, and that you've always been connected to the divine. Now let me tell you how a being made of pure light led me back to teachings I thought I'd lost forever. September 28th, 2024, 11:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I just checked my phone, scrolling mindlessly through nothing in particular, lying in bed unable to sleep. Another 12-hour shift at Riverside Hospice behind me. Another day of watching people slip away while I felt nothing but professional detachment. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Complete, absolute silence. My bedroom window had been cracked open. I always slept with fresh air, and normally I could hear the wind in the Douglas firs, the occasional car on the distant highway, the creaks of my old house settling. But suddenly, everything stopped. Even the ambient hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the white noise I'd grown so accustomed to I barely registered it anymore, vanished. Then came the light. Not the harsh brightness of a flashlight or headlights. This was soft, almost liquid, seeping through my bedroom window like water flowing upward. It was golden white, the color of early morning sun through honey, and it moved with intention. It didn't flood the room, it entered gently, pooling on my wooden floor, spreading slowly across the braided rug beside my bed. My rational mind immediately went to work. Car headlights, neighbor's porch light, some reflection I'd never noticed before. But the light was coming from my backyard, where there were no roads, no houses, nothing but trees and the small creek that ran along my property line. I sat up, heart beginning to pound. The light grew brighter, but not in a way that hurt my eyes. It was expanding, taking up more space, and with it came a warmth that filled the room. Not heat, warmth. The difference matters. It was the feeling of being held, of safety, of coming home after being lost in the cold. I should have been terrified. Every survival instinct should have kicked in, but instead, I felt drawn to it. I got out of bed, my bare feet touching the cool floor, and walked to the window. My hands trembled as I pulled back the sheer curtain completely. There, in my backyard, about 20 feet from the house, was something I can only describe as a presence. It wasn't a craft, it wasn't a machine, there was no metallic saucer, no science fiction spectacle. What I saw was a concentration of light, a vertical column of luminescence about 7 feet tall, hovering perhaps a foot above the ground. The grass beneath it was moving, not from wind, but from some kind of energy, bending and swaying in slow waves. The shape was vaguely humanoid, but completely non-physical. I could see through it, yet it was undeniably there. Inside the light, patterns moved, geometries I couldn't quite focus on, like trying to remember a dream while you're still in it. Colors shifted, gold to white, to the palest blue and back again. And I knew, without knowing how I knew, that it was aware of me, that it had come for me. My breath caught in my throat, my mind screamed that this couldn't be real, that I was having some kind of breakdown, that the stress had finally cracked something inside me. But my body knew differently. Every cell in me recognized this as real, as more real than anything I'd experienced in years. I backed away from the window, my hand clutching the curtain. The light didn't move closer, it simply waited. And then, without words, without sound, I felt something, a communication, a knowing placed directly into my consciousness. Do not fear. The words weren't in English, they weren't in any language, they were pure meaning, delivered instantly, completely understood. I am not here to harm. I am here because you called. I didn't call anyone, I whispered aloud, my voice shaking. Your loneliness called, your emptiness called, your longing for truth called. I heard. Tears sprang to my eyes, sudden and overwhelming. How did it know? How could anything know the depths of what I'd been feeling, the isolation, the desperate, quiet ache I'd been carrying for so many years? Come outside, Claire. Let me show you what you've forgotten. It knew my name. Every reasonable part of me said to stay inside, lock the door, call someone. Though who would I call? Who would believe this? But a deeper part, a part I'd suppressed for so long I'd forgotten it existed, whispered that this was what I'd been waiting for, that this moment, impossible as it seemed, was the answer to questions I'd stopped asking. I walked downstairs in my pajamas, my legs feeling distant and dreamlike. I unlocked the back door. The September night air touched my skin, cool and real. The grass was damp with dew beneath my feet. The light remained where it was, patient and still. I walked towards it slowly, each step feeling both terrifying and inevitable. As I got closer, the warmth intensified, wrapping around me like an embrace. I stopped about 6 feet away, close enough to see the patterns moving within it more clearly, fractals of light, spinning and folding in ways that seemed to exist in more dimensions than my eyes could properly process. "What are you?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "I am what you might call a guide. I exist in forms you cannot fully perceive, but I am here and I am real and I have something to share with you." "Why me?" "Because you are ready, because your heart, though it feels broken, is actually opening, because the work you do, sitting with the dying, offering comfort even when you feel none yourself, has prepared you for this moment." I felt my knees weaken. I sank down onto the grass, sitting cross-legged in my own backyard, staring up at this being of light. "I don't understand any of this." "You will, but first you must let go of your fear. You must trust what you're about to experience." And then, gently, like a hand reaching across an impossible distance, I felt it touch my consciousness, and everything changed. I wasn't always this empty. There was a time when I felt deeply connected to life, to purpose, to something sacred. I grew up in a small Methodist church in Eugene, Oregon, where my parents took me every Sunday without fail. My father was a high school math teacher, my mother worked at the public library, and faith was as much a part of our household as dinner at 6 and homework before bed. I loved those Sunday mornings. I loved the hymns, the way everyone's voices blended together in the old sanctuary with its stained glass windows depicting scenes I'd memorized. Jesus with the children, Jesus calming the storm, Jesus with arms outstretched in welcome. I loved the potluck dinners in the church basement, the sense of community, the feeling that we were all part of something larger than ourselves. Most of all, I loved the idea of Jesus, not as a distant judge or stern authority figure, but as the gentle teacher I saw in those windows, someone who cared for the sick, who sat with outcasts, who taught that love was the highest law. That version of faith felt real to me. It felt like home. I became a nurse because of that faith. I genuinely believed I was called to serve, to ease suffering, to be a source of comfort for people in their most vulnerable moments. I graduated from nursing school at 23, worked in a hospital for a few years, then found my way to hospice care when I was 29. At first, it was everything I'd hoped it would be. I felt like I was doing sacred work, shepherding people through their final transition with dignity and compassion. I would pray with patience if they asked. I would read scripture to them, hold their hands, assure them that they weren't alone. But then, my mother died. She was 61, pancreatic cancer, diagnosed stage 4, gone in 3 months. I took a leave of absence from work to care for her at home. I did everything I'd done for countless patients, managed her pain, kept her comfortable, sat with her through the long nights. But this time it was different. This time it was my mother's hand I held, my mother's fear I tried to soothe. She died on a Thursday morning in April, the rain coming down in sheets outside. I was sitting beside her bed and I watched the exact moment the life left her body. One breath, then nothing. The room felt instantly empty, like something essential had been extracted. I waited for something, some sense of her presence, some sign that she'd transitioned to somewhere else, some confirmation that all those years of faith and prayer had meant something. I waited for peace, for a feeling of release, for anything that would tell me she was okay. Nothing came. Just silence. Just her empty body. Just me, alone in that room with the rain outside. My father fell apart after that. He died 18 months later, and the doctors called it a heart attack, but I knew it was a broken heart. He'd lost his will to keep going without her. And I lost something too, though it took me years to fully realize what it was. I went back to work. I returned to hospice care, but the sense of sacred purpose was gone. I was good at my job. I knew how to manage symptoms, how to talk to families, how to create a peaceful environment for dying, but it became purely mechanical. I was performing a role, executing a script, going through the motions I'd perfected. The prayers I said with patience felt hollow. The scripture I read felt like words from a foreign language I no longer understood. When family members asked me if I thought their loved one was going to heaven, if I believed they'd see them again, I said yes because that's what they needed to hear, but I didn't feel it anymore. I stopped going to church 6 months after my father died. At first, I told myself it was just temporary, that I needed time to grieve, but weeks became months, became years. The few friends I'd had from church reached out at first, then gradually stopped when I kept declining their invitations. I didn't blame them. I had nothing to offer. I was a black hole of emptiness, pretending to be a functioning person. By the time I turned 40, I'd perfected the art of being alone. I lived in the small house my parents had left me, a 3-bedroom craftsman on 2 acres outside the city. I kept a garden because my mother had loved gardening, and tending it gave me something to do with my hands. I worked my shifts, came home, ate simple meals, sat on the porch with a glass of wine, and watched the seasons change. I had no romantic relationships. There'd been a brief marriage in my early 30s, a kind, quiet man named David who worked in IT. It lasted 3 years before we both admitted we were just 2 lonely people who'd mistaken proximity for connection. We divorced amicably. He remarried 2 years later. I sent a card. I was genuinely happy for him. I didn't date after that. I told myself I was too busy, too focused on work, too set in my ways. The truth was simpler. I was empty. You can't pour from an empty vessel. The loneliness was constant but manageable, like a low-grade headache you learn to ignore. I'd wake up, shower, dress, drive to work. I'd care for my patients, people with days or weeks left, people saying goodbye to everything they'd ever known. I'd listen to their fears, their regrets, their desperate last-minute questions about meaning and purpose and what came next. I'd offer comfort with words I didn't believe, gentleness I didn't feel. Then I'd drive home, make dinner, tend my garden if the weather allowed, and sit on that porch until darkness gave me permission to sleep. I existed. I didn't live. The worst part wasn't the loneliness itself. It was the knowing.
I knew I'd had something once: faith, connection, purpose, a sense of belonging to something larger. I knew what it felt like to pray and feel heard, to sit in church and feel moved, to believe that love was real and powerful and transformative. I knew what I'd lost, and I couldn't figure out how to get it back. I tried in small ways. I'd occasionally attend a service at different churches, hoping something would spark that old feeling. Nothing did. I read books on spirituality, on finding meaning, on coping with loss. The words made intellectual sense, but didn't touch the emptiness. I even tried therapy for a few months, sitting across from a compassionate woman who asked thoughtful questions. I could analyze my grief, understand my patterns, recognize my isolation, but understanding didn't heal anything. So I settled into a resigned acceptance. This was my life now. I helped other people die with dignity, and I lived without it. I was 47 years old, professionally competent, financially stable, and completely, utterly hollow. Until that September night when the light came, until something impossible broke through the walls I'd built and asked me if I was ready to remember what I'd forgotten. Until a being I couldn't explain offered to show me something I'd given up hoping existed. I didn't know it then, but I was about to discover that everything I'd lost, the connection, the purpose, the faith, had never actually left. It had just been waiting for me to be ready to see it differently.
Sitting there on the damp grass, looking up at this column of living light, I had a choice to make. I could stand up, walk back inside, lock the door, and convince myself this was a hallucination brought on by stress or exhaustion or too many years of accumulated grief. I could call it a breakdown, schedule an appointment with a psychiatrist, get myself medicated back into functional numbness. Or I could stay. I could lean into this impossible moment and see where it led. The being waited, patient and still, its light pulsing gently like breath. There was no pressure, no demand, just an invitation hanging in the air between us. "If I stay," I said aloud, my voice trembling, "if I listen to whatever you want to tell me, will I regret it?" The response came instantly, not in words, but in pure understanding. "You will never regret choosing truth over fear." Something in those words, or rather in the knowing they carried, broke through my last resistance. I'd spent years choosing fear. Fear of feeling too much, fear of being disappointed again, fear of hoping for something beyond the empty routine I'd created. Where'd that gotten me? Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. "Okay," I whispered, "I'm ready." Or, "I'm willing to try to be ready." That is enough. The light began to move then, not toward me, but around me, creating a gentle circle on the grass. The warmth intensified, and with it came a sensation I can only describe as being seen, truly, completely seen for the first time in my life. Not judged, not evaluated, just witnessed in my entirety. Every sorrow, every loss, every moment of loneliness and doubt and desperate searching, all of it was held in that light with perfect acceptance. I started crying. Not delicate tears, but deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere I'd kept locked away for years. I cried for my mother, for my father, for my failed marriage, for every patient I'd watched die while feeling nothing, for the girl I'd been who'd believed so easily, and the woman I'd become who believed in nothing. The light held steady around me, and I felt something I hadn't felt since before my mother died. I felt held. "You have carried so much," the being communicated. "You have offered comfort to hundreds while receiving none yourself. You have held space for dying while feeling dead inside. This is not what you were meant for." What was I meant for? I asked through my tears. To remember, to awaken, to understand what you were taught but never fully grasped. "I don't understand." "You will, but first I need you to do something for me." I looked up at the column of light, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. What? Trust what you're about to experience. Your mind will try to reject it, to explain it away, to categorize it as impossible. But your heart knows better. Your heart has been waiting for this. I nodded, not really understanding, but willing to try. The being's light began to shift then, the patterns within it moving faster, creating shapes I almost recognized. And then, so gently I barely noticed the transition, I felt myself lifted, not physically, but consciously. My body remained on the grass, but my awareness expanded outward, upward, into something vast and incomprehensible. I was still me, still Claire Patterson, 47-year-old hospice nurse sitting in her backyard in Oregon, but I was also more than that. I was awareness itself, consciousness without boundaries, and in that state, I could perceive things my normal mind couldn't process. The being spoke again, but this time the communication was layered, carrying meanings within meanings. What you're about to see isn't new information, it's remembering. Everything I show you, you already know, you've just forgotten. We all forget when we take physical form, but the truth is always there, waiting. What truth? The truth about love, the truth about connection, the truth about what the one you call Jesus actually taught, and why his message was never about religion, it was about awakening. My heart was pounding. I don't know if I believe in Jesus anymore. I don't know if I believe in anything. Belief is not required, only openness, only willingness to see what you've been unable to see because you were taught to look in the wrong direction. Where should I look? Within, always within. That's what he taught, though the message was buried under centuries of misunderstanding. The kingdom of heaven is within you. The light is within you. The connection you've been mourning as lost has been inside you all along. I felt something crack open in my chest, not painfully, but like a door long rusted shut finally giving way. "Show me," I whispered. "Please, show me what I've forgotten." "Close your eyes," the being instructed, "and remember." I closed my eyes, and the vision began. What I experienced next, I hesitate to call a vision, because it felt more real than ordinary reality. It was as if layers of perception I'd been using my entire life were suddenly stripped away, revealing what had been there all along. I was no longer in my backyard. I was standing on a path made of light, not walking on it, but existing within it. The path stretched forward and backward infinitely, and I understood without being told that this was the journey every consciousness takes. Not a linear journey from birth to death, but an eternal unfolding of awareness seeking to understand itself. Along this path, I saw moments. Not my moments, or not only mine. I saw flashes of human experience across time. A mother holding a newborn, a man weeping alone, children laughing in sunlight, a woman tending a garden, people gathering to share food, hands reaching out to help, eyes meeting in recognition. And woven through all of it was a presence. Not a person, not a being with a face or form, but a quality, a frequency, a state of being that I can only call love, though that word feels inadequate for what I perceived. The being's voice, no longer external but speaking from within my expanded awareness, said, "This is what he taught. Not rules, not doctrine, not systems of belief. He taught that this," the presence intensified, flooding through every scene I witnessed, "is the truth of existence. Love is not an emotion, it is the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. It is what you are when all the false layers are stripped away." I watched a scene unfold, a figure I knew was meant to represent Jesus, though I couldn't see his face, sitting with a group of people. Not preaching from a podium, not commanding from authority, but sharing a meal, speaking quietly, touching hands, laughing. He reminded people of what they'd forgotten. He showed them that the divine wasn't distant, wasn't harsh, wasn't sitting in judgment. The divine was in them, around them, between them, as close as their own breath. "But the church," I heard myself say, my voice strange in this space between spaces. "The church taught that we're sinners, that we're broken, that we need to be saved." The church taught fear because fear creates control. But that wasn't his message. He met people in their suffering, yes. He offered healing, yes. But not because they were broken, because they'd forgotten they were whole. Another scene emerged, the same figure kneeling beside someone who was ill, light flowing from his hands. But as I watched, I understood that the light wasn't coming from him, it was coming through him. He was channeling something that existed everywhere, in everyone, but most people couldn't access because they didn't know it was there. He performed what you call miracles to demonstrate possibility, to show that when you align with love, when you remember what you are, the limits you accept as reality become fluid. He healed not because he was uniquely divine, but to prove that divinity is universal. So he wasn't special? The being's communication carried both correction and gentleness. He was special because he remembered fully. He maintained consciousness of his true nature while in physical form, something most souls forget completely when they incarnate. But he never claimed exclusivity. He said, "The works that I do, you will do also, and greater works than these." He meant it literally. I felt tears streaming down my face, or rather, I was aware of my physical body still sitting in the grass, crying even as my consciousness experienced this expanded state. Your religions made him a deity to worship instead of an example to follow. They put him on a pedestal and said, "He is above you, different from you, better than you." But his entire message was, "I am showing you what you are. Wake up. Remember." Another scene, the figure speaking to a crowd, gesturing to a child. In my expanded awareness, I understood the message beneath the words. This purity, this openness, this natural state of love and wonder, you all have this. You've just covered it with fears and judgments and false beliefs about who you think you're supposed to be. The kingdom of heaven is within you, the being repeated. Not in the future, not in some distant realm you reach after death by believing the right things. Within you, now, always. "But I felt so empty," I said. "If it's within me, why can't I feel it?" "Because you've been looking for it in external things, in churches, in relationships, in achievements, in others' approval. You've been taught that connection comes from outside, that you must seek and earn and prove your worth. But connection is your natural state. You've simply forgotten how to access it." The path of light beneath me pulsed with warmth. You chose to become a hospice nurse because some part of you remembered. You wanted to sit with people in transition, to ease their fear, to remind them they're not alone. Even when you felt nothing, you were still performing an act of love. Even when you thought you'd lost your faith, you were still living its core truth, compassion for suffering. I don't feel like I was living any truth. I feel like I've been going through the motions. Motions of love are still love. You couldn't see it because you expected it to feel a certain way, the way it felt when you were younger, when belief was easy. But you've grown. Your understanding has deepened. What you call emptiness is actually space, space you've cleared for a fuller truth to enter. I wanted to believe that. I wanted it desperately. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Now I show you what you've really been seeking all along." And the vision shifted. Even as I experienced this expanded awareness, even as part of me recognized truth in what I was being shown, another part, the part trained in skepticism and rational thought, began to fight back. My mind seized on the impossibility of the situation. I was sitting in my backyard in the middle of the night, having a conversation with a being made of light that was showing me visions of Jesus's true teachings. This was textbook hallucination. This was a mental break. This was everything I'd studied in nursing school about dissociative states and psychotic episodes. You're categorizing this as pathology to avoid feeling it, the being communicated gently. Of course I am, because this is impossible. Light beings don't visit middle-aged nurses in Oregon. People don't have mystical visions in their backyards. Why not? The question stopped me cold. Because that's not how reality works. Reality is far larger than what you've been taught to perceive. You've spent years watching consciousness leave physical bodies, yet you convinced yourself nothing continues. You've felt intuition guide you in patient care, yet you called it coincidence. You've witnessed moments that seemed divinely timed, yet you refused to acknowledge the pattern. You've lived in a universe full of mystery while pretending everything is explainable. My jaw clenched. Science explains things. Medicine explains things. Grief and stress explain things. What you're suggesting is that I should just abandon rational thought and believe in magic. I'm suggesting you expand your definition of rational. Is love rational? Is consciousness rational? Is the fact that you exist at all, that anything exists, rational? Or is it the most profound mystery you've been taught to take for granted? The church taught that Jesus is the only Son of God, that he died for our sins, that salvation comes through him alone. What you're saying makes all of that meaningless. I'm saying those teachings were layers added later, interpretations designed to create hierarchy and control. Go back to what he actually said, the words attributed to him directly. The kingdom of God is within you. You are the light of the world. You will do greater works than I have done. Does that sound like someone claiming exclusive divinity? Or does it sound like someone trying to wake people up to their own divine nature? I wanted to argue, but I couldn't find the words. I'd read those passages countless times as a child, and they'd always been explained in ways that reinforced my smallness, my need for external salvation. But hearing them now, in this context, my parents believed. They were good people. They prayed, they served, they lived their faith. Are you telling me they were wrong? I'm telling you they were doing their best with the understanding they had. They taught you what they were taught. The love they showed you was real. The connection they felt was real. The framework they used to understand it was incomplete, but the essence was true. Tears came again, hot and ashamed. Even if this is real, even if you're really here and showing me truth, why me? I'm nobody. I stopped believing. I stopped praying. I gave up. I spent years feeling nothing while other people suffered. I'm not special. I'm not worthy of this kind of experience. There is no worthy or unworthy. Those are human concepts designed to create hierarchy. Every consciousness is an expression of the divine, every single one. The homeless addict and the spiritual teacher are equally sacred. You don't earn awakening through good behavior or lose access to it through doubt. It's your birthright, always available, waiting for you to remember. But I've been so cold, so disconnected. I've sat with dying people and felt nothing. You felt everything, which is why you shut down. You felt their fear so deeply it terrified you. You felt your mother's death so completely it broke you. You protected yourself the only way you knew, by numbing. But numbness isn't strength. Allowing yourself to feel again, that's the courage. Spiritual transformation is supposed to be hard. You're supposed to struggle, to work for it, to earn it through discipline and practice and years of devotion. This feels like cheating, like I'm being given something I didn't earn. Who told you growth had to be suffering? Who taught you that ease means it isn't real? Yes, you've struggled. Years of loneliness, grief, disconnection. That was the hard part. This is grace. This is what happens when you finally cleared enough space to receive it. Grace was never real for me before. Grace was always there. You just couldn't see it through your pain. What if I accept this? What if I let myself believe again, and it's all just my imagination, my desperate mind creating meaning where there isn't any? What if I open myself up and then discover I've been deluding myself? What if you're wrong in the other direction? What if you spend the rest of your life refusing to see what's right in front of you because you're afraid of being fooled? What's the greater risk, believing in connection and being disappointed, or dying having never let yourself feel it again? I had no answer to that. This was the deepest truth, the one beneath all the intellectual arguments. "I'm terrified," I whispered. "If I let myself believe this, if I open to this kind of love and connection, I'll be vulnerable again. I'll care again. I'll hurt again. I can't survive that kind of pain again." You've been surviving pain all along, the pain of disconnection, which is the deepest pain there is. The pain of remembering who you are, of feeling fully, of loving without protection. That kind of pain is alive. What you've been feeling is the pain of being dead while still breathing. The truth of that hit me like a physical blow. This was the one that broke me completely. If what you're saying is true, if the church got it wrong, if salvation isn't what we thought, if it's all about remembering instead of being saved, then my mother died terrified for no reason. She spent her last months afraid she hadn't been good enough, hadn't believed hard enough, might not make it to heaven. I held her hand while she begged God for mercy. And if you're right, she never needed to be afraid at all. She was already whole, already divine, already home. I collapsed completely then, lying back on the grass, staring up at the stars through my tears, feeling my mother's love as real as the ground beneath me. And in that moment, all my resistance shattered. "Okay," I whispered to the being, to the universe, to whatever force of love was holding me in that moment. "Okay, I'm ready. Show me everything."
"Good," the being communicated. "Now I'll show you that this isn't philosophy or belief. It's as real as the ground beneath you. Watch." The being's light pulsed, and suddenly my perception shifted. I was still looking at my backyard, the old oak tree, the garden beds, the wooden fence, but now I could see something more. Everything was surrounded by a subtle glow, a field of energy that extended several inches beyond physical forms. The tree pulsed with slow, deep vibrations. The grass emitted tiny sparkles. Even the fence posts held a faint luminescence. "What am I seeing?" I asked, my voice filled with wonder. "The energy that comprises all form. Everything is vibration, frequency, light moving at different speeds. Physical objects are simply energy condensed. You've always had the capacity to perceive this. Most humans do. But you've been taught not to see it, to dismiss it as imagination." I held up my own hand and gasped. Around my fingers, extending outward in layers, was a field of light. It moved as I moved, pulsing with my heartbeat. "This is your energetic body. It interpenetrates your physical form. When you feel someone staring at you from behind, when you sense a room's atmosphere, when you know someone's emotions without them speaking, you're perceiving their energy field interacting with yours." "This is real? I'm really seeing this?" "As real as your physical sight. More real, actually, because this persists beyond physical death. Your mother's energy, the consciousness that animated her body, still exists. It has simply taken a different form." I sat there, staring at my glowing hands, watching the energy dance and shift, and something fundamental in my understanding of reality cracked open. "Now notice the chronic pain in your lower back.
the being said. I'd had lower back pain for years, an injury from lifting a patient wrong, compounded by long shifts on my feet. It was my constant companion, a dull ache I'd learned to ignore. "I feel it," I said. "Now place both hands on that area. Close your eyes. Instead of resisting the pain, send love to it. Thank your body for holding you all these years. Imagine light flowing from your heart, down your arms, through your hands, into the tissue that hurts." I felt ridiculous, but I did it. I closed my eyes and placed my hands on my lower back. At first, nothing happened. Then, gradually, I felt warmth building in my palms. It grew warmer, almost hot, and then the warmth penetrated deeper into the muscles that had been knotted for years. The pain began to release, not all at once, but in waves, like ice melting in warm water. I felt the tightness unwind, felt space open where there had been only compression and hurt. "Oh my God," I whispered. "You did that, not me. I simply reminded you that you could." This is what he taught, that love, directed with intention, heals, not sometimes, not in special cases, but as a law of consciousness. He called it faith, but it's more accurate to call it alignment with the natural healing capacity that exists in every body. I moved my back experimentally. The chronic ache that had been there for 5 years was gone, not reduced, gone. Tears streamed down my face. "Now, think of someone you love, someone still living." I thought of Rachel, a nurse I'd worked with for years. We'd drifted apart after my parents died. My fault, not hers. She'd reached out repeatedly and I'd withdrawn. Hold her clearly in your mind. Send her love. Not words, just the feeling of love, appreciation, connection. Imagine it flowing from your heart to hers across whatever distance separates you. I did. I pictured Rachel's kind face, her easy laugh, the way she'd tried to be there for me. I felt gratitude for her friendship, regret for pulling away, hope that we might reconnect. I sent all of that toward her like a prayer, a beam of light across the darkness. My phone, which I'd left on the porch table, suddenly buzzed. I stood, walked over, picked it up. A text message from Rachel, sent just moments ago. "Hey Claire, I know it's late, but I was just thinking about you. I miss you. Can we get coffee soon? No pressure, just miss my friend. Heart." I stared at the message, my hands shaking. That's impossible. Is it? Or is it natural? You sent energy with intention. She received it, though her conscious mind might not know why she suddenly thought of you. This is how prayer works when it works, not as supplication to an external deity, but as directed consciousness affecting other consciousness. You're all connected, all the time. You've just forgotten how to use that connection intentionally. "One more thing," the being said, "to prove that consciousness affects physical reality, not just perception. Go to your garden and look at the tomato plant, the one that's been struggling." I knew exactly which one it meant. I had 6 tomato plants and one had been failing despite my care. Yellowing leaves, stunted growth, no fruit. I walked to the garden bed, looked down at the struggling plant. Place your hands on either side of it, not touching. Send it love, just as you did with your back. Thank it for growing. Tell it you appreciate its life. Imagine it healthy, vibrant, bearing fruit. I knelt in the dirt, positioned my hands around the plant, and did as instructed. I felt the same warmth building in my palms. I imagined the plant healthy, thriving, green. I stayed there for several minutes, and then, incredibly, I saw it. The leaves began to straighten, the yellow tinge faded, color returning to a deeper green. A tiny bud I hadn't noticed before began to swell, opening just slightly. "This can't be happening this fast," I said. Time is more fluid than you think when you work at the level of consciousness. You accelerated natural processes that would have taken weeks into minutes. This is how he walked on water, how he calmed storms, how he multiplied bread.
He understood that physical reality is responsive to consciousness. He simply operated from that understanding so completely that what seemed miraculous to others was to him natural law. Finally, expand your awareness outward. Feel not just your own energy, but the energy of everything around you. I closed my eyes and tried. At first, I felt only myself, my heartbeat, my breath. But then, gradually, I began to feel more. The oak tree's slow, ancient presence, the grass's simple aliveness, the insects moving through the garden, the creek running along my property line, the deer in the woods beyond. All of it connected, all of it one vast web of consciousness experiencing itself through countless forms. And beyond that, faint but perceptible, I felt other humans, not as distinct individuals, but as points of light in the darkness, some bright, some dim, all connected by threads too subtle to see but impossible to deny once felt. This is what love your neighbor as yourself actually means, the being explained. Not a moral commandment, but a description of reality. Your neighbor is yourself. All consciousness is one consciousness, experiencing infinite perspectives. The separation you perceive is temporary, illusory, a necessary condition for individual experience, but not the deeper truth. I opened my eyes, and the world looked completely different. Everything was alive. Everything was sacred. Everything was connected. "I understand," I whispered. "I finally understand what he was trying to teach." "You're beginning to understand. Now I'll show you even more."
The being's light intensified, and I felt myself drawn even deeper into the expanded state. What it showed me next would change everything I thought I knew about existence, purpose, and the nature of what I'd been calling God. What you were taught to call God, an external being, a judge, a king sitting on a throne, this was a metaphor that became mistaken for literal truth, the being communicated. In my expanded awareness, I perceived something vast beyond description, not a being with personality and preferences, but pure consciousness, infinite, creative, loving awareness that was the foundation of everything that existed. This is Source. It is not separate from you. It is you, experiencing itself through your unique perspective. When you look through your eyes, Source looks through your eyes. When you feel joy, Source feels joy. When you suffer, Source experiences that suffering. You are not a creation separate from the Creator. You are the Creator, temporarily forgetting itself to explore what it's like to be Claire. My mind reeled. That can't be. I'm nothing. I'm small. I'm limited. You are infinite consciousness wearing the temporary limitation of a human form. The limitation is intentional. It allows for specific experiences that wouldn't be possible in unlimited awareness. But the limitation is not who you are. It's like an actor wearing a costume. The costume is real, but it's not the actor's true identity. Jesus, the consciousness you know by that name, was Source awareness that chose to incarnate while maintaining full memory of what it was. Most souls, when they take physical form, forget completely. This forgetting allows for genuine discovery, genuine growth, but occasionally a consciousness incarnates with purpose to remind others what they've forgotten. I saw an image, not with my physical eyes, but in my awareness, of a light so bright it was almost unbearable, condensing itself into human form, choosing limitation, choosing vulnerability, choosing to experience everything a human experiences, pain, joy, fear, love, while somehow maintaining awareness of its infinite nature. He came to show you what you are. Every miracle he performed was a demonstration. See, this is possible for consciousness. This is what you can do when you remember. Every teaching was an attempt to wake people up. The kingdom of heaven is within you. You and the Father are one. These things I do, you will do also, and greater. But the church made him special, made him the only one. Because people wanted a savior outside themselves, it's easier to worship someone else's divinity than to accept responsibility for your own awakening. So his message, remember what you are, became believe in what I am. His example became an exception. His empowerment became dependency. Why does any of this exist? I asked. Why would infinite consciousness choose to forget itself? Why would it subject itself to pain and suffering? Because in infinite awareness, there is no contrast, no discovery, no growth. Imagine existing in perfect peace, perfect love, perfect knowledge forever. There is beauty in that, but there is also stagnation. Source is creative, always seeking to know itself more fully. How do you appreciate light without experiencing darkness? How do you understand love without experiencing fear? How do you know forgiveness before first experiencing harm? I saw it then, the grand design, souls choosing to incarnate, choosing specific challenges, specific relationships, specific suffering, not as punishment, but as curriculum. Your mother chose the cancer that killed her, not consciously, not in the way you choose an outfit, but at a soul level. She agreed to that experience because it offered specific growth. Her fear of death, her questions about worthiness, these were opportunities to transcend old programming, to remember her true nature in the face of physical dissolution.
But she didn't transcend it. She died afraid. In the physical, yes, but the moment her consciousness released from her body, all that programming dissolved instantly. She remembered. She understood. The fear you witnessed was temporary, a final lesson in releasing control, in surrendering to what is. And now she exists in fuller awareness, helping guide others through similar transitions. You've heard that God is love, but you understood it as sentiment, as emotion. Love is not emotion. It is the attractive force that holds all consciousness together. It is why particles bond to create atoms, why atoms bond to create molecules, why souls bond to create relationships. It is the gravitational force of consciousness, pulling all separate things back toward unity. I felt it then. Love not as feeling, but as physics, as the basic operating system of reality. When Jesus taught, love one another, he was giving you the key to everything. Love is how you heal, how you manifest, how you evolve, how you remember. When you operate from love, you align with the fundamental frequency of existence. Miracles aren't violations of natural law. They're natural law operating at the frequency of love instead of fear. You are living in a unique moment, the being continued. Humanity is approaching a threshold. For thousands of years, you've operated primarily from fear. Fear of death, fear of scarcity, fear of each other. Your religions, your governments, your economic systems, all built on fear and control. But consciousness is evolving. More and more souls are incarnating with purpose, with memory closer to the surface. The forgetting isn't as complete. The awakening is accelerating. I saw it. A wave of light moving across the planet, touching person after person, some resisting, some embracing, but the wave unstoppable. Jesus was an early awakener. Buddha was an early awakener. Many others across your history. They came to plant seeds to show what's possible. Those seeds have been growing in the collective consciousness for millennia. Now they're beginning to flower. You are part of that flowering, Claire. Me? I'm nobody. I've been asleep for years. You've been preparing. Every patient you've sat with, you've learned about transition. Every moment of loneliness, you've learned about the pain of forgetting connection. Every experience of emptiness, you've cleared space for truth to enter. You weren't lost, you were becoming ready. Death, as you fear it, doesn't exist, the being explained.
Consciousness cannot be destroyed. When the physical body stops functioning, awareness simply shifts to a different frequency. Most of what you call heaven and hell are states of consciousness, not locations. When you die with love in your heart, with acceptance, with peace, you transition smoothly into expanded awareness. When you die in fear, in anger, in attachment, you create temporary confusion, but it's still temporary. Eventually, all consciousness returns to full awareness. So everyone goes to heaven? Everyone already is in heaven, but most don't realize it because they're identified with limited physical experience. It's not about going somewhere else, it's about remembering where you've always been. You are eternal consciousness, temporarily experiencing separation. Death is simply the moment you stop experiencing separation. So what is your purpose, Claire Patterson, hospice nurse, 47 years old, sitting in a backyard in Oregon, receiving impossible knowledge? I don't know. To remember, and then help others remember. Not through preaching, you've seen how that fails, through being, through living from this understanding, through allowing your life to become a demonstration of what's possible when someone awakens. You return to your work with dying patients, but now you'll see them differently. You'll see souls in transition, consciousness preparing to expand. Your presence operating from this new frequency will ease their passage in ways you can't imagine. So that's it? Just be different? Just be different? That's everything. One awakened consciousness affects hundreds. Those hundreds affect thousands. This is how transformation happens, not through force, not through conversion, but through resonance. You become a tuning fork vibrating at the frequency of love, and others near you begin to resonate with that frequency. What's happening to you tonight is happening to millions of others in different ways across your planet. The great remembering has begun. Some experience it through meditation, some through plant medicine, some through near-death experiences, some through beings like me. The method doesn't matter. What matters is the awakening. The moment a soul remembers it's not small, not limited, not separate, not powerless. I felt the truth of that resonate through every cell. Jesus said, "I will return." He didn't mean a physical return. He meant this: the Christ consciousness, the awakened awareness he embodied, would return through all of you. You are the second coming. Every person who remembers their divine nature, who chooses love over fear, who demonstrates what's possible, they are Jesus returned. Not literally him, but his message made living again. And suddenly I understood why I'd been brought to this moment, why the being had come, and why everything in my life had led here. I was being asked to remember, and in remembering, to help others remember. Not through teaching or preaching, but through becoming a living example of what awakening looks like. I'm ready, and this time I meant it completely.
What happened over the next several hours, though time itself seemed strange and fluid, was the most profound shift I've ever experienced. The being guided me through stages of awakening, each one building on the last, until I was no longer the same Claire who had sat crying in her backyard. Feel all the stories you've told yourself about who you are, the being instructed. I am broken. I am alone. I am faithless. I am empty. Feel them, and then watch them dissolve. I did. I felt every limiting belief I'd constructed over 47 years, every judgment, every self-criticism, every moment of shame or unworthiness, and I watched them float away like mist in sunlight. They weren't truth. They were just thoughts, repeated so often they'd calcified into identity. My awareness of the energy field around my body intensified. I could feel it extending several feet in all directions, pulsing with my heartbeat, breathing with my breath. I could feel how my thoughts affected it.
Fearful thoughts made it contract and dim. Loving thoughts made it expand and brighten. "This is how you affect reality," the being explained. "Every thought, every emotion sends out ripples into the field around you. Other people feel these ripples without knowing why. This is why your presence alone can comfort dying patients even when you feel you have nothing to give." Something in my chest that had been closed for years began to open. Not metaphorically, I felt it physically, like a flower unfurling. Warmth spread from my heart center outward, filling my entire body. And with it came love. Not love for any particular person or thing, but love as a state of being. Unconditional, unchanging, infinite love that had always been there, waiting beneath my grief and fear. I sobbed with the relief of feeling it again. The being helped me expand my awareness outward, past my own energy field, to feel the connection to everything around me. The tree, the grass, the earth, the sky, the animals, other humans sleeping in houses miles away. All of it connected, all of it one vast web of consciousness. "This is what Jesus felt constantly," the being said. "This awareness of unity. This is why he could love everyone. He experienced them as himself." Faces began to appear in my awareness. People who'd hurt me, people I'd hurt, my ex-husband, a colleague who'd betrayed my confidence, my younger self, so angry at God for taking my mother. "Forgive," the being whispered, "not because they deserve it, but because carrying that weight blocks your energy." And I did. One by one, I released every grievance, every resentment, every wound, not by forcing it, but by understanding, really understanding that everyone was doing their best with the awareness they had, that all pain comes from forgetting, from the illusion of separation. Forgiveness flowed naturally when I saw from that perspective. Harder than forgiving others was forgiving myself, for the coldness, for the years of going through the motions, for not knowing how to comfort my mother, for my failed marriage, for every moment I'd been less than I wanted to be. "You did nothing wrong," the being said. "You were exactly where you needed to be to arrive at this moment. Your path was perfect, even when it felt broken." Something fundamental shifted when I accepted that. "Now say it," the being instructed. "Say, 'I am divine consciousness experiencing physical form.'" I hesitated. It felt arrogant, blasphemous even. It's not arrogance to claim what you are. It's humility, recognizing that your small self is temporary, that your true nature is infinite. Say it. "I am divine consciousness experiencing physical form," I whispered. Again, feel it as truth. "I am divine consciousness experiencing physical form." And suddenly, I did feel it, not as concept, but as lived reality. I was infinite awareness, temporary clair, eternal source, all at once. "You will not be alone in this," the being said. "From now on, when you quiet your mind and listen, you will receive guidance, not from external beings necessarily, but from the deeper knowing within you, your higher self, your connection to Source. Trust it." I felt that guidance already, a subtle presence in my awareness, like a voice that wasn't a voice, a knowing that arose from nowhere and everywhere. "You have a choice now," the being said. "You can return to your life and forget this. The human mind is skilled at explaining away what it can't process. Or you can integrate this experience, let it transform you, live from this new understanding. The choice is yours." There was no choice, really. How could I forget what I'd experienced? How could I return to the half-life I'd been living? "I choose to remember," I said. "I choose to live from this truth. I choose to become whatever I'm meant to become." Then it is done. You are awake. The process will continue. Awakening is not a single moment, but an ongoing unfolding. But you've crossed the threshold. You cannot truly go back.
The light began to fade as dawn approached. I could feel the being preparing to depart, its presence gradually withdrawing. But before it left completely, it offered final guidance. When you return to work tomorrow, you will see your patients differently. You will recognize them as souls in transition, consciousness preparing to expand beyond physical limitation. Your presence, operating from this new frequency, will ease their passage. You won't need to explain what you know. Your energy will communicate it. What do I tell people? How do I explain what happened? You don't unless directly asked. You simply live differently. Your transformation will be visible in how you move through the world, more peaceful, more present, more compassionate. Some will notice and wonder. When they ask, you'll know what to share and what to keep private. Trust that inner guidance. The being's light had diminished to a soft glow now, barely distinguishable from the approaching sunrise. Remember, Jesus didn't write books or start organizations. He simply embodied love so completely that everyone who encountered him was affected. Be that. Be the embodied answer to questions people haven't yet learned to ask. Will I see you again? In different forms, perhaps, but you won't need me as you have tonight. You have direct access to Source now. That connection is permanent. I was simply a reminder, a catalyst. The awakening is yours. And then it was gone. I sat in my backyard as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Everything looked the same. Same trees, same garden, same house. But I was seeing it all as if for the first time. Every leaf, every blade of grass, every bird song was a miracle. All of it, consciousness expressing itself, Source creating endless variations of beauty. I went inside, made coffee, and got ready for my shift at the hospice. But I wasn't the same Claire who had left for work the day before. The first day back. When I arrived at Riverside Hospice that morning, my colleague Jennifer immediately noticed something different. "You look, I don't know, rested? Different somehow," she said, studying my face. "I slept well," I offered, smiling. The first patient I saw was Marcus, an 82-year-old man dying of congestive heart failure. He'd been agitated for days, fighting his decline, angry at his body for betraying him. I entered his room with the medication I'd prepared, but before I could speak, he looked at me with wide eyes. "You seem different about you," he said. "You feel peaceful. I feel calmer just having you here." I sat beside his bed, and without planning to, I placed my hand gently on his arm. I felt the energy flow, that same warmth I'd discovered the night before, and watched as his breathing slowed, his shoulders relaxed. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. "I know, but I promise you there's nothing to fear. You're not ending, you're transitioning, and what's on the other side is more beautiful than anything here." I didn't know where those words came from, but they felt true, and Marcus believed them. I could see it in his face. The ripple effect. Over the following days, the same pattern repeated. Patients who had been agitated became calm. Family members who had been anxious found peace. Even my colleagues began commenting on the shift, not in the patients, but in me. Rachel, my old friend, called me for coffee. We met on a Saturday morning, and within minutes she was crying, saying she didn't know why, but she felt like she could finally tell me about the pain she'd been carrying. I listened, holding space with a presence I'd never been capable of before. At the end of our conversation, she said, "I feel lighter.
How did you do that?" "I didn't do anything," I said truthfully. "I just listened, really listened." But I knew it was more than that. I was operating from a different frequency now, and that frequency was contagious. This was what the being meant: transformation through presence, awakening through resonance. I didn't need to preach, I just needed to be. And in being, I was helping others remember what they'd forgotten, that they too were divine consciousness temporarily wearing human form, that they too were infinitely loved, that they too could awaken.
I'm telling you this story because I know many of you have felt what I felt. That emptiness, that disconnection, that sense that something essential is missing from your life, even when everything looks fine on the surface. Maybe you were raised with faith and it stopped making sense. Maybe you've prayed and felt like you were talking to nothing. Maybe you've sat in churches and felt more alone than when you sat in silence. You're not broken. You haven't failed. You've simply been taught to look for connection outside yourself, in rituals, in institutions, in other people's interpretations of ancient texts, when the truth is, and has always been, that the connection you're seeking lives within you. Jesus didn't teach religion. He taught awakening. He didn't say, "Worship me." He said, "Follow me," meaning do what I'm doing, remember what I'm remembering, love as I'm loving, be as I'm being. Every miracle he performed was a demonstration of what becomes possible when consciousness operates from love instead of fear, when you remember your true nature, when you access the divine power that has always been yours. The churches transformed his message of empowerment into a system of dependency because empowered people don't need intermediaries. People who know their own divine nature don't require priests to intercede, buildings to contain their prayers, or doctrines to limit their understanding. But you do need one thing. You need to remember. And that remembering is happening now all over the world. Not just to special people or holy people or chosen people, to everyone who's ready, to everyone who's cleared enough space through their suffering, their questioning, their loneliness, their desperate searching for something real. What happened to me in my backyard wasn't unique. It was just one form of the remembering that's available to you right now, in your own life, in your own way. You don't need a being of light to visit you, though it might. You don't need a dramatic awakening, though you might have one. All you need is willingness. Willingness to consider that you're more than you've been taught. Willingness to feel again, even if feeling means risking pain. Willingness to question the comfortable stories you've told yourself about who you are and what's possible. If this story resonated with you, if something in you recognized truth in these words, leave a comment below. Tell me about your own moments of awakening, your own experiences of connection, your own questions about what Jesus really taught. You're not alone in this journey. Thousands of others are waking up, remembering, returning to the love that was always there beneath the fear. Subscribe to Stories of Light for more testimonies like this, real stories from real people discovering that awakening isn't about becoming something new, it's about remembering what you've always been. 3 months have passed since that September night. My life looks mostly the same from the outside. Same job, same house, same daily routine, but everything has changed. I wake up grateful now. I see the morning light and recognize it as sacred. I feel the aliveness in my own body and know it as divine. I move through my days with a peace I couldn't have imagined before. The patients I care for feel it. Yesterday, a woman named Dorothy, dying of cancer, held my hand and said, "You make me feel safe, like everything's going to be okay." "It is," I told her, and I meant it. My garden thrives. That tomato plant that was dying is now heavy with fruit. My chronic back pain hasn't returned. I sleep deeply and dream vividly. often receiving guidance I wake to write down. Rachel and I are close again. She started asking me questions about faith, about meaning, about her own spiritual emptiness. I don't preach to her. I just share what I've experienced, and I watch recognition dawn in her eyes. "I think I've known this all along," she said last week. "I just forgot." "We all forgot," I told her, "but we're starting to remember." This is the work now, not converting people, not convincing anyone of anything, but simply being a reminder, being the embodied evidence that awakening is real, that connection is possible, that the teachings attributed to Jesus weren't metaphors or impossible ideals, but actual descriptions of what becomes available when consciousness remembers itself. I am not special, I am not chosen, I am simply awake or awakening because it's an ongoing process. And if it happened to me, a broken, lonely, faithless hospice nurse sitting in her backyard at midnight, it can happen to anyone. It can happen to you. You are reading these words for a reason. Not coincidence, not algorithm, not random chance. Some part of you, the part that's tired of pretending, tired of performing, tired of searching for meaning in places it doesn't exist, drew you here. That part of you knows. It knows you're more than the story you've been telling yourself, more than your job, your relationships, your successes or failures, more than your doubts, your wounds, your accumulated disappointments. You are consciousness itself, temporarily experiencing limitation so you can remember what you are through contrast. You are divine love wearing a human costume for a brief season of exploration. You are the infinite, choosing to experience the finite. And the loneliness you feel, the emptiness, the aching sense that something is missing, that's not depression or failure or evidence that something is wrong with you. That's your soul calling you home. That's the deeper truth of your being, trying to wake you up from the dream of separation. Jesus understood this completely. His entire mission was to remind people of what they'd forgotten, that heaven isn't a location you go to when you die, but a state of consciousness available right now. That God isn't an external authority judging your worthiness, but the very essence of what you are. That love isn't a commandment to follow, but the fundamental frequency of existence itself. You don't need to believe this. Belief is just another mental construct, another story. But you can test it. You can experiment with it. You can sit quietly, place your hand on your heart, and ask, what am I beyond this body? What am I beyond this story? What am I when everything else falls away? And if you listen, really listen, beneath the noise of your thoughts, you'll hear the same answer that is echoed through every genuine spiritual teaching across all cultures and all times. You are love. You are light. You are consciousness having a temporary human experience. And you are, have always been, and will always be infinitely connected to the source of all that is. The journey home doesn't require going anywhere. It just requires remembering. You're already there. You just forgot for a while. Welcome back. This story is a fictional spiritual narrative inspired by themes of awakening, love, and light. It does not claim historical or religious authority.